All right, Precision is nearing completion. In fact, after part 11, we have a fully functional, playable game. We're now able to start out at the title screen. We can start the game. We can run around and save cells. We get points for saving those cells. If we don't save cells, we get the points that we could gain, well, basically garnished. So we lose value from the worth of each cell. We have a heads-up display to show us how many lives we have left, what the value of the cells are, how many points we've made so far. We're able to advance from level to level once there are no longer any savable cells left on the screen. Woo! Precision is a functioning game, but we're not yet done. Digging all the way back to our requirements, one of the things that we said that the game needed to have was a time power-up that would spawn onto the screen, and the player could grab that time power-up and it would slow time down for everything with the exception of the player. And then the player could go around and start saving things, carefully weaving in and out of cells. So it is definitely a way to give the player a break for just a moment when there's so much going on the screen. So let's go ahead and come over here to our implementation plan overview, and we will mark off that guy because now we've got our major sections for part 11 done. And let's go ahead and shift our focus up here to part 12. In part 12, what we're looking to do is to create the generic power-up class. This is going to serve as our base class for all power-up systems. We're then going to turn around in part 13 and we're going to extend the generic power-up class into a very specific class, and that will be our time power-up class. And this will be the class that will be responsible for slowing time down. Now, Logan, why have we opted to design things this way?
Well, we need some place where we could put all the supporting code that makes an actor that can have pickup code, spawning code, respawning code, so activation, and some timing necessary to drive some of those elements. So there's a substantial amount of code that has to be put together so that we can have the ability to be picked up, the ability to be spawned in the first place, the ability to, after an amount of time, respawn, and the ability to be active for a certain amount of time. So we have all these individual things that have to happen and some supporting timing code so that certain things can happen over time.
So all of these things right here are going to sit up here in our base class, which will be our power-up class. Then we'll simply come in here and we can extend it as many times as we'd like so that we could then have more specific classes. And in this case, this is where we're going to turn around in part 13 and create the time power-up class. Now here's what's nice. As Logan was just saying, by putting things like pickup, spawn, respawn, active time, how about the bar? Because there's going to be a bar demonstrating how much time we have remaining that our power-up is going to be active. So all of these things is going to result in a good bit of code to make it all function properly. And we don't want to have to retype this code every single time we create a new power-up, because we could have a power-up for invincibility, a power-up for time control, a power-up for who knows what. And they all need the ability to be picked up. They all need the ability to spawn and respawn. They all need to have an active time that counts down with a bar that's getting smaller and smaller. So all of these things need to be in place for every power-up that gets created for Precision. So by taking all of these common features and putting them into the power-up base class, we can then use inheritance to inherit these features into our more defined or more specific classes. Right, Logan?
Right. Then a specific class like the time power-up can have the code that causes the timing effect, and pretty much only that code. Everything inside of the time power-up can be geared towards the timing effect.
Exactly. It can focus on what it needs to do.
Exactly.
Control time.
And then when you're looking at the time power-up, just not have to worry about spawning, respawning, or pickup.
Precisely. Now let's take a look at the big picture of how we're going to pull this off. First of all, before we get into specifics, how's this whole power-up thing going to work? Let's go ahead and start taking a closer look by first bringing up a new whiteboard. And so here we are with part, that's a little high up, there we go. So part 12, power up class. All right, the big picture shall begin with a screen drawing. So here we go. Let's see if I can actually pull this off. So something like this, like this, and as close. And like that. All right. Here is our playing screen. Our power-up is going to sit right over here. I'll darken them in, so it'll be easier to see who our power-up when I start drawing in the screen. So that's our power-up. All right, that's kind of wonky. Why do we want a power-up that is going to start out off-screen? Well, when the power-up it's basically waiting to be spawned into our level, we don't need to show it because it doesn't exist yet. It's not available for a player to pick up. So where is it? Well, there's two approaches that we could take. One, we could set up a very simple state system, and with that state system, we could say that currently it is in a waiting to spawn state. And if we were in that state, we simply wouldn't draw it. That's easy enough. But then we would have to turn around and we would have to make the collide check, the collision between the player and the power-up, a little bit more sophisticated than what we want to put into precision, because it really doesn't warrant it if you think about it. Because what happens is, if we're in a state where our power-up is not visible, then the player should be able to run across where it is and not collide with it, right, Logan?
Right, and the problem is if we had set up some kind of state system, that alone would be very simple.
Right.
The problem is we would have to go back and rework our actor drawing and actor collision code to respect that.
That's
just
right.
Having the state doesn't mean it's going to be respected by some older code.
Because our power-up, as Logan just said, have to rework the actor stuff, that's because our power-up is actually going to extend actor. So by doing that, in fact, let's go ahead and just jot that down, Logan, because I think that's very important. So here we are with actor. And we know actor gets extended into all sorts of different things, the player, cells, etc. But we're going to be extending this into our power-up, which, as we already said, will then be further extended into the time power-up. Now, by doing this, here's what we get. Actor already has its update called, and it's drawing stuff called. So by creating power-up as an extension to actor, power-ups automatically know to update 60 times a second, and they already know to draw. So that stuff is in place for us. So that is very cool. But as Logan was just saying, if we put this simple state system into place, we would have to then go back in here and start visiting things like the actor's draw, because now we'd have to say, okay, if this actor happened to be a power-up, and if the state was something like waiting to spawn, don't draw it. We don't want to have to start modifying this code. Like I said, we want to keep this as simple as possible, since this is our first real XNA game in XNA Xtreme 101. So the easiest way to do this is by simply moving the actor off screen.
Right, what we can do is we can go back to our goal with the power-up, and that is a power-up has to disappear off screen for an amount of time. For one, it has to start invisible. If you want to say, let's call it an inactive state. When a power-up is inactive, that means it's not visible on the screen, and because you can't see it, it should act like it's not there, act like you can't collide with it.
Right.
So let's try to think of another way that could be accomplished. What if an actor was drawn off screen? Well, one, it wouldn't be visible because it's not drawing in the visible screen range, and two, it wouldn't be collidable because it would be too far off screen for the player to ever reach it, because the player can't go off screen.
Exactly.
So that would accomplish the same goal without actually having to go and rework the actor code.
You got it. So that is what we're going to do here. Now, let's go ahead and make sure that we have a clear understanding of two words that we're going to be using here. Create the power-up, spawn and respawn the power-up. There is a difference. The creation of the power-up is going to take place when we do the begin level. Because remember, when we advance from level to level, what do? We wipe out all of our actors. And the power-up is an actor. So that means the power-up just got wiped out. So we need to create the power-up. Creating the power-up is going to consist of actually bringing it into existence. So let me do this. So create power-up. So now this guy, by having him created, as soon as we run into a playing state, he's automatically being drawn and automatically being updated. Well, when we create him, we also, by creating him, he's going to have a time bar. So a time bar gets created. Now, a time bar starts out at 100% for the bar itself. Now, this time bar is going to be centered, so it's going to appear right up here at the top.
So at this point now, after creating an actor, and that actor in turn creating a time bar, now we have two things that are visible.
That's right.
That we need to deal with.
Because with the power-up being created and us not going in there and setting a position, where's it going to be? 0, 0. So we're going to see just a part of it right here on the screen. Okay? And we're going to see all of our time bar. So these are two things that we need to correct. And the way that we correct it is by taking the power-up, up's position and setting it to the negative origin. All right, by taking it to his negative origin, what does that do? Well, it throws us over 50% of its width and up 50% of its height, so it puts it up here in the corner like I've got shown there. It is now off the screen. The player cannot get off the screen to collide with it, so there's no way for us to collide with it, and as far as the player knows, it is now invisible. We then need to turn around with our time bar, and we need to set its percentage to 0. By setting its percentage to 0, what happens? It becomes invisible because there's no percentage to show. Remember, in the calculation for figuring out how much of the time bar we're going to draw, we take that percent and multiply it by width. Well, if we multiply 0 by width, it's 0, which means it's not going to be shown. So these two things need to be taken care of when we create the power-up. So we can say this is step 1. So here we are with step 1 would be this guy, and I'm just going to point right here to the center because we know we'll have a time bar, but we're not going to see the time bar. Now, by doing this, what we'll need to do is throw this guy into a respawn state. How long until it needs to actually spawn onto the screen? Okay, so time's going to be counting down, tick, 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 run out of time, spawn. So in step 2, we're going to get spawn. So here's the difference, create and spawn. All spawn is going to do is pick a random position on the screen. Using that wonderful utility method that we've already set up that is going to obtain a random position on the screen and take into account the radius of the item so that none of the item accidentally gets drawn off screen. So this will result in this guy being placed somewhere on the screen. So this is step 2. So he's now been spawned. We're not active though. He's not active. He's waiting to be picked up. Okay? And we're not waiting to spawn again either because he's already been spawned. He's already visible. Our time bar remains at 0% right now. We're waiting for everything to come to life. So at this point we could just kind of do this. It's now up to the player. If the player never touches it, that's everything that takes place from this power-up. Now, let's say a player touches it. So now what's going to happen is we're going to hit step 3, and this is where we're going to activate the power-up. So what happens when we activate the power-up? Well, the first thing we need to do is hide the power-up. Because if we don't, that would be a very misleading signal that you're leaving behind for the player because it's like, hey, wow, check it out. I've slowed time down and the power-up's still there where I can still grab it. So how are we going to hide it? Simple. We're just going to take him right back. I knew I was going to hit that. It's going to take him right back up here and move him. That is an arrow, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. We're going to move him off screen, so this will be step 3. But we're also going to do something else. We're going to set the bar, the active time for the bar, to 100%. And we're going to set up an active time remaining that can begin counting down. Okay? Once he counts down, then we're going to go back into a position where, well, we've just counted all the way down, so now we have run out of time bar to show, so it's now gone, it's at 0%. The actor is already gone because we've moved it off screen, so it's invisible, so it looks like we're now waiting for it to respawn, and we are. So we'll turn back around and we'll set ourselves back up for a spawn in X amount of time position and wait for it, or situation, and wait for it to count down and spawn again. So we'll create kind of a little bit of a loop that's going on right here after the time runs out, where it's going to go back into a waiting and then spawn again. Okay? Now what I'm going to do is diagram this out a little bit better so that you can see more specifically what's going on in the timing, because we've got two timing mechanisms that are taking place. We've got a respawn time, which comes along with a respawn time remaining, and we have an active time, which comes along with an active time remaining. And how these guys work together inside the Power Classes update is very important because it is the heart of the power-up system. But right there, this little drawing really does do a pretty good job of showing what's going on. We're simply moving an actor off screen, and we're moving a time bar down to 0, and then when the actor spawns, we move him on the screen, and then when he gets picked up, we move him back off screen, and we set that percent bar up to 100%, and we let time start counting down. Okay, and then we're going to repeat the vicious cycle of respawning and all that good stuff. So let me show you exactly what's taken place. So here we go. First of all, those 4 things that I just mentioned, we've got respawn time remaining and the respawn time, active time remaining and active time. All right, they're going to get set inside of the game's begin level. As a matter of fact, let me just kind of block off a little bit of space right here, Logan, before I diagram this out. Watch what I'm going to do. I think this will be kind of helpful. So inside game's begin level, we need to make sure that a few things happen. Now, all of this code isn't directly in begin level, but begin level, by the time it's done executing, all these things are going to have taken place. We're going to create the power-up. And we already know, so I don't have to write everything down, that create the power-up means all of this stuff up here is going to take place. Time bar percentage gets set down to 0 and the power up position gets set to the negative origin so that it is off the screen. Then we're going to turn around and we are going to set the respawn time and the active time. So the respawn time is set and active time is set. So here we go. Let's go ahead and just draw out a couple of things. So this is our active time. This one over here is going to be our respawn time. And we're going to say respawn, what, every 1 second, Logan?
Yes, I think it defaulted to 1 second. So it's similar to the cell attack timing. Okay.
And then our active time, I believe we're going to let it stay active for 3 seconds?
And then, yes, after activation, you get 3 seconds of slowdown time.
Excellent. All right, now let's start drawing out this little block diagram. So I'm going to start out with a box up here. And this box is going to indicate the respawn time remaining. Let me write it out, then I'll explain. So respawn time remaining. This is how many seconds until we spawn our power-up. Okay, so there's going to be a number in here, and this number is going to do what? It's going to count down. And it is finally going to hit 0, or perhaps even a little bit less than 0. When that happens, we're going to spawn our power-up. Now don't get confused. This does not mean create the power-up. It's already created. That happened in begin level. It spawns it, which means step 2, back over here. In fact, let me grab it. There we go. Back over here. So it is now on the screen and can be seen. Now, this just simply, let me go and adjust this back, randomly places item.
Right, because that's really all spawning is for the power-up to spawn, that simply means it has to appear on screen. And in order to get a position that does that, we'll just grab a random positions, because that way it'll look like the power-up always spawns with a random position on screen.
So randomly places power-up. These two things will be taking place inside the power-up's update. Okay? Now, at this point, again, it is up to the player to pick it up. So there is no, we're not going to be coming out of here or anything. We're now just simply waiting on an event to occur, more or less. This event is going to be the player colliding with it, so this is going to call on pickup, which is going to exist inside of our power-up. So inside here, this is where we're going to need to hide the power-up. I'm just going to write it as PWR up. A little bit easier. All right, so hide the power-up, and this is going to set, this is very important here, set the active time remaining. Okay, so active time remaining, and it's going to call activate. Now check this out. This is pretty cool here. Activate is going to be a protected virtual method that when we extend the power-up class into the more specific power-up classes, such as the time power-up class, that is where we will place our code for what the specific power-up needs to do. So here, when you pick it up, we'll call on activate. There will be no code in the base power-up class. Activate. We will have specific code in the activate in the right class. In other words, in the time power-up class, that activate will be overridden with the specific code in there for how it needs to function. Okay? So this is where it gets called, when the power-up gets picked up. So that only makes sense. So here we are. We're going to come out of this pickup. Let me make the exit out of there just a little bit cleaner looking. We're going to come down here into another box. This right here is going to be our active time remaining. Active time remaining is going to do what? Count down. Exact same thing that our respawn time remaining did. So there's going to be a number in here. Guess what number it's going to be? Remember right here where we said set the active time remaining? What's our active time? 3. So we'll start out by putting a 3 in active time remaining and let it count down. When it counts down to 0 and it hits 0 or accidentally goes a little bit below 0, what's going to take place? Well, I'm just going to call this, kind of make a box like I did the spawn one up there. I'm just going to call it time's up. So basically this means active time remaining has run out. And what do we do here? Well, first thing we're going to do is reset our respawn time remaining. All right, that's just a giant word, guys. This guy, we're going to reset him. How do we reset him? To our respawn time. So this 1 goes up there and it begins counting down again. Excellent. This right here is what's taking place to drive the whole power up in regards to timing. So this is taking place in update also. So check this out. Out of here, since we just reset the respawn time remaining field, that puts us all the way back up here, because respawn time remaining is now greater than 0. So update's going to pick that up and start counting down. There we go. We have just created a loop, if you will, a circular or a cyclic condition where we're always going to rather have the power up sitting there on the screen, or it's going to be active, or it's going to be counting down in a state where it's waiting to spawn. Okay? Now to kick all this off, we're going to have inside of our games update, so in games update, we're going to have a very simple did player collide with power up. So a very simple check. If yes, hang on, that looks a little rough. That's better. So we'll say this is yes. then what is going to happen? That is how we get into pickup right here. Because we can't just have pickup sitting there all by itself. It wouldn't make any sense. Bink, there you go. So inside the game's update, once again, in the playing state, and we check through all of our different things. Well, if we come across the power-up, we can check to see if the player's colliding with it. If the player's colliding with it, call on that power-up's pickup, which will do what? It will hide the power-up, set the active time remaining, and call activate. That means the active time remaining will begin counting down. Okay? When it finally reaches 0, what happens? Oh, time's up. Time to reset our respawn. And we go back up here, and we're waiting to spawn again. Anything you want to add to this, Logan?
One more thing to jot down in the time's up section.
Yeah.
Is put down a call to deactivate. Because we've got a call to activate.
Actually, let me finish that off. There's a couple more things. How about a call to deactivate? This will make things really clear here. So now we've got a call to activate up and pick up, and when time's up, we'll call deactivate so that our final class that has been extended from our power-up class can handle initializing everything back to a normal state, like take time and set it back to normal. And then the final thing we can do is set our time bar, or I'll just say bar, percent to 0.
Just to make sure that it gets completely hidden off the screen.
That's right. In case there's a little, it's gone negative or something. We don't want it shown on the screen. Let me put a divider in here. There you go. All right. Whew. Anything you want to add to this, Logan?
This kind of explains or reiterates why we need a base power-up class, is we want all of these things to happen.
Right.
In a descending class, the only things we really want to worry about are things like activate and deactivate. But you see, in order for those to get called at the proper times, there's a few things that have to happen.
Oh, yeah, just a few. And we don't want to have to recreate this code every single time we make a new power-up. That wouldn't make sense.
Or at the very least, to have the actual slowdown timing code have to appear buried within all of this code.
Exactly. So, let's take a look. Now that we have the big picture in mind, what is it that we need to do? So here we go with a new whiteboard. First thing we need to do is actually create the power-up class. Because this will be a new class, correct, Logan?
Right, we'll need to extend actor again into a new class, and this will be the base power-up class.
And as Logan says, it will extend actor. And we need to make sure that we'll remove the text using, we'll add the XNA uses, all that good stuff.
Right, so the same basic setup steps that we had done for the other classes that we had created after actor. When we went through and created the player class, the enemy class, the cell class, there was things we did. We adjusted the using statements, so we got rid of namespaces we didn't need, and then added some namespaces that we did, so we could get the types that were in the XNA framework. Exactly.
Then we've got a few constants to add in. So we've got several fields, actually. So let's go ahead and jot some of these down real quick. So constant integer, our time bar. We need to know what the time bar width is going to be.
Right, because the whole idea is that when the time power-up is active, we have that bar to display the time remaining, but that bar needs to have dimensions. So what size should it be on screen? We're going to hold these as constants inside of the power-up class itself. Now, of course, if a time bar has a width, it also needs a height, so we'll put both of its dimensions down simply right here.
Yep, and of course, what else do we need? We need the actual time bar. So a time bar of type bar. All right, excellent. All right, so now we need those 4 different fields we were talking about a second ago, the active time and the respawn time, and then, of course, the 2 time remaining. So let's go ahead and put those down. Those are going to be floats. And we'll have active time. And then active time remaining. And then we're going to have our respawn time. And then finally we will have our respawn time remaining.
Now, the reason to hold both the time remaining and the original time as fields is so that this power-up can continue to run its own timing without further interaction from the outside world, from within the game. That means that once it started, once active time and respawn time have been set, those are remembered inside of the time power-up so that it can continue the cycle of spawning and activating without having to constantly be reset. This means we don't have to write any kind of timing mechanism outside of the power-up.
Exactly. And we're going to have two float properties, active time, and we'll have our respawn time.
Right, not only will these be used for simple accessors to the active time and respawn time fields, but in the case of respawn time, I want it set up so that setting respawn time actually kicks off the timing mechanism as well. So that means in the set accessor we'll actually have to do two different things instead of just hitting the field.
Which means basically you're going to not only set the respawn time, you're going to also set the respawn time remaining,
right,
which update will automatically pick up on.
Because it's having time, and that respawn time remaining is what kicks it into the respawn or waiting to respawn state.
Exactly. And then in methods, we're going to start out in the game. So, well, actually, no, I'm sorry. We're going to skeleton in the methods in the power-up class first. So, of course, we've got a constructor. Since we are extending actor, we need to make sure that we pass that texture back to the actor and all that good stuff. So we're going to get things skeletoned in, and we'll go ahead and clean up our constructor here. So we've got constructor. We're going to have an override for update. As we've already seen, that's going to play a crucial role in the timing here. And then we've got pickup. And then we've got two protected virtual methods, one called activate and the other one called deactivate. And of course, these are all methods. But once again, both of these two guys right here are virtual, and they're protected so that basically the only people that can access them are descendants of this class. Okay? So that's going to take care of getting everything skeletoned in. We're not just going to code everything straight out, because we're going to build this up so it'll be very easy to see exactly why everything is being set up the way it is. So the next thing we're going to need to do at this point will be to turn around into the game class. So let's just say turn your attention up to here. So in game class, there's a few things that we're going to need to set up over there. We're going to need some fields. And with fields, we're going to do a new section that is going to be commented with time power up. And then things that we're going to need to create inside here is we're going to have two constants, both of them floats. One is going to be a time power up duration.
And that's simply going to be the amount of active time that you get when you activate the power up. How long does the power up's effect last once activated?
And like we already said, we're looking at what's going to be 3 seconds. We've got another constant float, which is time power up respawn time.
And then that's the time that has to elapse before the power up can spawn again. That's its respawn wait time.
No, not a lot to type. Not at all. And this is going to be 1 second. All right, then we're going to have a color. And this color is going to be our time bars color.
Right, because up until now we haven't addressed or stored any information inside of the power-up as to what the bar's color is supposed to be. We stored some dimensions, width and height, but we didn't store a color. And the reason for that is it would be nice to simply take in a color instead of store one, so that different descendants of power-up could have different colored time bars.
And I just took advantage of the time you was talking and threw the whole line in. All right, most of it anyways. Let's see, we've got a texture that we're going to need to add in. So, and it's going to be our...
Well, this is just the texture for the actor, and we've had to do this for just about every other actor as well when we did cells and enemies and anything else. We'll need a texture for the power-up actor when it's created.
Okay, so there's our time texture. And then, of course, that means we'll need to load that in as well inside our load graphics content. Need to make sure that the texture is brought in. So there we go. That's going to represent things like our active time and our respawn time, textures, etc. So from there, we can start focusing on methods. So let me just come down here, methods. Again, still working inside of our game class, we need to focus on begin level. And in begin level, this is where we need to create our power up. So create the power up, which we saw on the last whiteboard. And then we can build and test it, and we'll actually see the power up in the upper left-hand corner because we haven't done any positioning or anything like that. And then we can turn around and we can set its position, like I said, to the negative origin of it, and then it'll move it off screen, it'll be gone. And then we need to go ahead at this point and make sure that we initialize the time power-up's respawn time and active time to those two constants, the time power-up respawn time and the time power-up duration. So here we'll have... Actually, the whole thing would be time power up because that's what we're going to call it. So time power up dot respawn time, as we're calling on that property now, equals, and this guy right here is going to be equal to, let's see which one, yeah, this one up here. Equal to him. There we go. Just to save me from having to write a bunch of stuff out. And then we're going to have another time power up dot active time equals, and this guy is going to be equal to our time power up duration. Okay, so we'll get all that set up in place, and at this point, by calling upon the property respawn time and setting that to our time power up respawn time, if we had the code inside of update over in power up, then we'd kick everything off. But we haven't yet coded that in. Right now we're just getting it so that we can build the game and take a look. All right, where's that? Oh, it's off screen now. Good. Okay, let's go ahead and get these pieces of it set up and keep trugging on forward. So now that we've got all of this stuff in place, what we'll do is we'll turn our attention back to the PowerUp class and we'll start beginning work inside of Update. So let's go ahead and put down PowerUp class. So inside of the PowerUp class, this is where we'll just do something like, and this is so important, Logan, that I'm actually going to write this out. So I hope you guys don't mind. If you do, you can just fast forward. In Update, let me jot that down because that's kind of important here. I'm going to do an if our respawn time remaining is greater than 0, that's a 0, then what we need to do, that means there's time left before we need to respawn. So we're counting down. So we need to count down. So we're going to turn around and we're going to take that respawn, 500-mile long word. Yes, it is. And we're going to decrement it, and you've seen this a lot of times, by our game times, elapsed game time, total seconds. Okay, all abbreviated there, just for you guys. So we're going to just chip away at this. So every second it gets decremented by a second. Okay, we're going to chip away, but as we chip away, we'll turn right around and we're going to check to see if we just ran out of respawn time. So once again, I'm going to abbreviate this time around. So respawn time remaining. We're going to check to see if that is less than or equal to 0, because if it's less than or equal to 0, it's time to spawn. Let's go ahead and jump down just a little bit. So check to see if it's less than or equal to 0, and if so, the only thing we need to do is come in here and say, look, take the position of ourself, being the power up, and set it to that game 1 static method of get random screen position. get random, screen, position, and we pass in the radius. There we go. Lots of abbreviating, all right? And that's it. So then we could go ahead and close all this stuff off, and we could test it out right here. Because now what's going to happen is we'll launch the game. Of course, we're not going to see the power-up because it's been moved off screen to negative origin. But after 1 second, it's going to appear somewhere randomly on the screen. Now, if we run over it, we're not going to pick it up because we haven't put in any code inside of the game's update class, or excuse me, the game class's update method to check to see if our player has indeed collided with the power-up. But it will spawn. Now, there's no respawning or anything like that in place. So, next thing we need to do is turn around and look for the player touching it so that we can represent a pickup. So with this, now I'm going to shift back over this way, guys. Do a little bit more writing as we continue to fill the board up. So now actually I'm going to push it up just a little bit so I can get a little bit more room out of this. So in our game class, I'm just writing this, Logan, because you'll notice we're doing a lot of jumping around here.
Right. We're kind of implementing the power-up class in an incremental sense.
We are.
We'll take one small piece of functionality, put it in place, and get it working. Then take that and move to the next piece of functionality and continue progressing like that.
Exactly. So here, we're inside the update method inside of the game class. And of course, now what we're going to do is we're going to check to see if the player is colliding with the power-up, and if so, the power-up needs to be picked up. So I'll just say check for collision. With player. And if yes, then what we need to do is call the power-ups pickup. And I meant to actually say pickup. All right, so now calling the pickup method isn't going to do anything for us right now. So if we were to test this out, all is grand, but we're not going to see any difference in what we saw in the previous test after implementing the respawn, counting down, and spawning the item. So we need to turn our attention back over to the power-up class. So back in the power-up class, we're going to need to implement the pickup behavior. Okay, so in pickup, this is where we're going to need to do those things that we talked about. First of all, we're going to need to set position to the negative origin. So hide it. And then we need to set active time remaining to this dot active time. And I'm going to write it this way. It'll be a little bit easier for me. Otherwise, I'm going to jump back and forth 100 times. Active time remaining equals active time.
And that's once again the importance of holding the original active time value within the power-up class so that whenever we need to hit the pickup and say, well, what was the active time supposed to be? Okay, well, we've got that recorded since we created the power-up.
Exactly. And now, of course, we're going to turn around and call activate, which isn't going to do anything here because we're not going to have any code inside of activate, but there will be, hopefully, code inside of activate in a descendant class, and of course we'll call that, and there you go. So, at this point we can test it out, and we can see now that it'll get spawned, we can run over it, it's going to vanish because it's moved off screen, and we have started counting down the active time remaining, but have we? We haven't put that part of the update in. So at this point, we don't see any respawn or anything take place. So everything's starting to get set up. But at least we can demonstrate that, hey, take a look at this. I ran over it as the player, and bloop, it's gone. So it looks like I've picked it up. So at this point, we'll have to turn our attention back over to update. So here I am. So here we are, update inside the power-up class, and we'll begin coding inside of there. So we've got this one if section right here. We're going to follow that up with another section. And this other section is going to say if active time remaining is greater than 0, guess what? Everything's active. So we need to make the active time remaining decrement. So we'll simply turn around, the same type thing is going to set up, and we're going to take our active time remaining, and we're going to do the same thing we did above, minus equals float, and we're going to do our game time dot elapsed game time dot total seconds. Okay, so there we are. We're counting down at active time. Same thing as we did above with our respawn time remaining. We'll immediately turn right around and check to see if we have just reached 0 or gone below 0. So if, and I'll abbreviate once again, active time remaining is less than or equal to 0, what do we need to take place? At this point, what we'll need to do is make sure that the guy is actually being created, because we need to go into the constructor, because remember with the constructor all we've done is pass that texture up. We haven't actually put anything in there. So we need to fully implement the constructor right here, because now we have to see a time bar. And we need to see that time bar going away. And we haven't had a need to see it up until this point right here. So we'll need to go in there, and so this is kind of like a detour right here. So we'll hold this point in time. Let's see, where can I go to? And we will jump up to this nice little hole right here. And inside this nice little hole, we will visit the power-ups constructor real quick. And again, as Logan said, this is an incremental build process so that we're showing you why every single thing is going into this particular class. This is a really neat way to put everything together quickly. So here we are inside the constructor, and we're going to basically need to create a time bar. So time bar equals new bar, and we'll feed it that time bar width, the time bar height, and the time bar color, all of those fields that we've already defined. And then we need to turn around and take the position, and we need to set it to a location. Okay, which is basically going to be, we're going to take our screen, divide it by 2, and then we're going to push it off of the top of the screen just a little bit. So we're up at the top, and then we need to turn around and take our time bars alignment, and we're going to set it to bar alignment dot center. So we're going to center it. And then, remember, we need to make sure, because right now we can test. Everything's still going to work great. But now we're going to see that when the thing is activated, we have a time bar at 100, or excuse me, we're going to get a time bar at 100% automatically, like right when you launch the game, okay, and you start playing it, because it's at 100%.
Because if you remember back to the bar class, the bar's own constructor sets the percent to 1. So that means by default when a bar is created, it has full width.
Right.
So what we need to do here is counteract that. In the case of the time bar, we want the opposite to be true. We want the time bar to start out with a percent of 0 so that it starts out invisible. And
so what we'll do is we'll simply set its percent to 0. So now we've got everything in the constructor that takes care of that time bar. And here's what's nice. Now we can come back down here and finish up what's going on inside the update when what happens when we run out of active time remaining. Because, again, we've got a time bar to work with now. So basically, we will need to, well, a couple of things. Hang on.
Right. Well, looking at the time bar, the time bar's decrement, or excuse me, the time bar's percentage is going to have to be updated right alongside active time remaining. So before the if statement.
Before the if statement, yeah, that's where, right. Actually, let me just move this down. Just look back down at my notes. I'm going at 100 miles an hour right now and got thrown off just a little bit. Now we can come back in here and do this. Time bar.
Right, because the active time remaining is great and all for timing, but the problem is it's given in full seconds. So what we need is we also need a percentage that we can use to set the time bar percent.
So active time remaining divided by active time because we want to get a percentage.
Right, but since we have that original active time, we can just divide it against that, and that gives us active time remaining as a percentage, which can be set in the time bar.
Exactly. Now we can turn on, and the funny thing is, look at my notes, Logan, everything is laid out right. That's just what happens when I'm talking so fast, and I'm all over the screen in this video. So now we need to turn around and say, if our active time remaining is less than or equal to 0, all right, so our time bar has been getting smaller, just ran out, active time remaining just ran out. What are we going to do? Well, we've already said that we're going to need to reset our respawn time remaining, so let's do that. So our respawn time remaining equals, and we're holding that respawn time in respawn time. How convenient. And that is an R. Okay, so we've just set that back up. We're going to call on deactivate. And we're going to set that time bar percent back to 0 so that it is hidden.
That's just to make sure that since the percent is based on active time remaining, and we aren't going to guarantee that active time remaining is going to hit 0 because it's just a kind of threshold. It has to cross that threshold, and we don't know the exact value that it's going to hold.
Exactly.
But when it runs out, we do want the time bar to always be completely invisible, so we'll set it to exactly 0 to make sure that that's accomplished.
Precisely. Now check this out. By taking the respawn time remaining and setting that, so right here, by doing this, check out what we just did. The very next time we come back around and update, respawn time will now be greater than 0. So now we're going to start decrementing it and checking it and continue doing that until we hit the top position. So that's kind of how this cyclic loop continues, where we continue to go from respawning, spawned, waiting for pickup, picked up, active, timeout, respawn time, countdown, spawn, and there we go. Now we're back into this loop again. That's it. Whew. That is everything that we need to get accomplished in this video. There's a lot of things that's going to be going on, or in the coding video, that'd be the next video. A lot of things that's going on. We're going to be doing a bunch of jumping around, but again, hopefully this provides a pretty good overview of what's taking place and gives us a pretty sound roadmap to follow, and hopefully this block diagram right here really puts things into perspective as to exactly what is taking place. Logan, is there anything you want to add to this?
Nothing comes to mind. That's followed out everything that I think we had planned out for the time power-up, or excuse me, for the power-up class.
Okay. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap this video up and move on to the next video where we'll code it all out. So that's going to wrap things up. Thanks a lot, guys.